there comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you look back and wonder if all the pain, the confusion, the silence, and the losses were for nothing. You carry memories that still echo in your body, words that were never taken back, choices you wish you could rewrite. And for years, you've probably believed the past is something to escape or forget. But what if it was never meant to destroy you? What if your pain wasn't the end of your story, but the fire that forged who you were always meant to become? Carl Jung believed that the path to wholeness passes directly through our suffering. He said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." That doesn't mean we need to drown in it. It means the pain is trying to reveal something about your strength, your soul, and your purpose. Every heartbreak was a doorway. Every regret was a signal. Every shadow you've run from still holds a piece of your power. This video isn't about bypassing what happened to you. It's about entering it with new eyes. It's about becoming the alchemist of your own story. Because once you begin to understand your wounds not as punishments but as invitations, something begins to shift. The past stops being a prison and starts becoming a path. Maybe you were abandoned, betrayed, overlooked, or misunderstood. Maybe you've been telling yourself that healing means pretending it never hurt. But Jung's work teaches us the opposite. Healing begins the moment you stop resisting your truth and start listening to it. And from that place, your future is no longer a repetition of old patterns. It becomes something conscious, something sacred. So if you've felt stuck in a loop, constantly haunted by what was, know this: you are not here to live in the ruins. You are here to rise above them. Not as someone who got over the pain, but as someone who turned it into wisdom, into presence, into gold. In this journey, we're not just healing the past, we're redesigning the future with the raw materials of who you truly are. This is your invitation to stop surviving your story and start authoring it. Your past shaped what comes next. Now it's time to find the key to your next chapter, and it's been inside you all along. Most people are taught to tuck away their pain like it's something shameful. You're told to move on, to stay strong, to not dwell on what can't be changed. But what if the very thing you've spent your life trying to bury is the compass that could guide you home? Pain is not just a reminder of what broke. It is the soul's way of pointing you to what still needs to be made whole. Think back to a moment that hurt you so deeply that it changed the way you walk through the world. Maybe it was the quiet ache of being ignored when you needed someone to see you. Maybe it was the heartbreak of watching someone leave without saying goodbye. Or maybe it was the years of pretending to be fine while carrying a grief no one understood. These moments leave invisible markings on the psyche, and while we often call them wounds, Jung would have called them signals. Not signs of weakness, but coordinates on the inner map of your becoming. In Jungian psychology, individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, not the version shaped by fear or pleasing others, but the integrated self, the whole self. And pain is one of the first places where that process begins. Every mistake you regret, every moment you wish you could redo, is not random. It holds a thread back to something essential, something buried, something waiting. Imagine someone who grew up in a home where emotions were unsafe. Every tear was met with judgment. Every need was met with silence. That child often grows into an adult who becomes the caretaker, the peacemaker, the one who keeps everything running smoothly on the outside. But inside, they are starving for someone to ask, "How are you really?" That hunger, that longing, can become unbearable. But it also becomes a key, because once that person realizes their own depth, their need for connection, and their capacity to feel what others cannot, they begin to heal. And in doing so, they often become the ones who make it safe for others to be human. Therapists, artists, healers, guides. The wound didn't ruin them, it revealed them. This is the shift that begins to change everything. When you stop viewing your past as a weight and begin seeing it as a pattern, a message, a sacred breadcrumb trail left by your own unconscious. Your pain is not an enemy. It is an invitation to see the world through the eyes of someone who has lived, who has felt, who knows. Every time you ignored your gut, every relationship that mirrored your abandonment, every chapter you closed with shaking hands but an open heart, it was all leading somewhere, not away from yourself, but toward it. What felt like detours were actually coordinates. What felt like failure was feedback. Your life has been speaking to you the entire time. All that's left is to listen differently. So ask yourself, what if the pain was not the thing to escape, but the language your soul speaks in? What if that heartbreak was not the end of love, but the beginning of self-love? What if your suffering didn't shatter your potential, but shaped it? You are not off course. You are on a sacred trail, and your past is the map you've been searching for. The moment you realize that is the moment the path forward begins to illuminate. Now let's step into the next phase, how to take the raw material of that pain and begin turning it into something golden. There comes a moment when you realize you can no longer carry your past like a wound. You either let it define you or you let it refine you. This is where the inner alchemy begins, not in forgetting, but in transforming. Carl Jung called this the crucible of consciousness, a sacred psychological fire where suffering, when met with awareness, becomes strength. This is not about pretending the pain didn't happen. It is about returning to it with new eyes, with the wisdom of who you are now. Because the truth is, your past doesn't go away by being ignored. It goes quiet only when it has been seen, heard, and understood. There are memories that live in us like locked rooms, a parent who only offered love with conditions, a betrayal by someone you trusted completely, the year your body failed you, or the day you failed yourself. These are not easy stories, but when we turn away from them, we also turn away from the gold hidden inside. Jung once said that the treasure you seek is often in the place you least want to go, and that place is usually the one your soul keeps circling until you're ready to enter it fully. Healing begins the moment you decide to stop running. One powerful way to begin is through intentional journaling. This is not about venting, it is about confronting the story you've been telling yourself and asking, is this still true? You can write a letter to your younger self, not to judge them, but to offer what they never received. Reassurance, truth, love. Or you can revisit a memory you've carried in silence and ask it what it came to teach you. Real transformation often happens in moments that feel quiet on the outside but seismic on the inside. Picture a man who was ridiculed by his father every time he cried. He grows up emotionally guarded, mistaking stoicism for strength. But later in life he chooses to revisit those memories, not just to relive them, but to speak to that little boy with compassion, to say, "You were never weak, you were human." Slowly, that man begins to allow vulnerability back into his life. He becomes a father himself, not one who shames emotion, but one who honors it. His pain did not end with him, it became a bridge. That is gold. Or imagine a woman who was told for years that her voice was too much, too loud, too emotional, too intense. So she learned to quiet herself. She held her truth in her throat until silence became her safety. But eventually that silence began to ache. And one day, through therapy or journaling, or a single conversation where she finally let herself be honest, something shifted. Her voice returned. Shaky at first, but real. She became a writer, a speaker, and a guide for others who had been silenced. Her worst memory became her most sacred message. This is the essence of alchemical healing. When you meet your pain with presence, it stops repeating in disguise. The moment you look directly at the source of your sorrow, it begins to turn. The raw lead of your past starts to shimmer. Your job is not to erase the scars, but to extract the lesson, the strength, the voice, the depth. You are not meant to stay stuck in what happened to you. You are meant to rise through it, and it's not too late. Whether the wound was last year or 40 years ago, your soul holds the key. The gold is already there, buried beneath the shame, beneath the silence. And the more gently you unearth it, the more powerful it becomes. So the question is no longer, why did this happen to me? The question becomes, what can this become in me? When you start asking that, you stop being the victim of your story. You become the author of a new one forged by fire, one glimmering with gold. Now that you've begun transforming your past, let's explore how to use that gold to design your future. There is a quiet power that returns to you the moment you stop trying to fix the past and start building from it, not with the same tools the world once gave you, fear, avoidance, perfectionism, but with new ones forged from your truth. This is the turning point where healing stops being a memory and becomes a movement. Your story no longer keeps you trapped, but becomes the blueprint for what comes next. In Jungian psychology, individuation is the journey of becoming who you truly are, beneath all your roles, wounds, and defenses. And once you've mined your past for meaning, you're ready to build a future that reflects your deepest self. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. So how do you start designing that future? First, you let your values lead. Think about the gifts that emerge from your pain. If betrayal taught you to value honesty, let that guide your relationships. If burnout taught you to value peace, let that shape how you build your work life. Your suffering didn't come to harden you, it came to clarify you. And now, clarity is your compass. Create what Jung might call a symbolic life. A life that reflects your inner landscape. This doesn't mean grand gestures. It means choosing the things that align with your essence, no matter how small. For some, it's choosing work that finally feels meaningful. For others, it's ending a generational pattern and parenting in a way they never experienced growing up. It could mean choosing a partner who nurtures your soul rather than your ego, or choosing to live slower, more gently, more honestly. Each choice becomes a thread in the tapestry of your next chapter. Let's ground this with a real story. A man spent years chasing achievement, convinced that success would finally make him feel worthy. But even after reaching career heights, he felt hollow. It wasn't until he reflected on his childhood, where love was always conditional on performance, that he saw the pattern. So he began to rewrite, not by quitting everything, but by shifting how he lived. He chose to work less and coach his son's baseball team. He started painting again, something he loved but had long abandoned. Slowly, his life began to feel like his own. He wasn't just achieving anymore, he was aligning. His future stopped echoing his trauma and started reflecting his truth. Or think of a woman who was raised in a household where her needs were dismissed. For decades, she put herself last. At work, in relationships, even in friendships. Her boundaries were almost non-existent. But through healing, she discovered that her silence was not humility, it was residue. And with that awareness, she began making small but radical changes. She started saying no. She changed jobs. She moved to a city where she felt more at home in her skin. Today she's not loud, but she's present. And people feel her, not because she demands space, but because she finally occupies her own. These are not fairy tales. These are lives rewritten by truth. The future is not waiting for you to be perfect. It is waiting for you to be honest. The more authentic your choices become, the more your external life begins to reflect your internal evolution. Your home, your relationships, your work, your days, they all begin to take the shape of your soul. And yes, there will be doubt. There will be people who don't understand your shift. That's okay. They were aligned with your old story, not your new one. Let them fall away, if they must. You are not designing a life for everyone. You are designing a life for the one who is finally awake within you. This is the miracle of healing. Not just that the pain softens, but that it gives birth to something so clear, so steady, so you, that the future no longer feels like a question, it becomes a sacred responsibility. To live in alignment, to live in truth, to live like someone who remembers that gold can be found in the ruins. And now, the alchemy is not occasional. It becomes your way of life. Transformation does not wait for perfect timing. It happens in the most ordinary of moments, hidden beneath everyday discomfort. The spilled coffee, the harsh tone of a loved one, the tight chest before a difficult conversation. These are not just inconveniences. They are invitations. Soul alchemy is not reserved for grand awakenings. It is a sacred discipline of responding to life's whispers before they turn into storms. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious will rise to meet us when we stop resisting and start listening. But listening is not passive. It requires devotion. It means stepping into discomfort with the curiosity of a seeker rather than the defensiveness of the wounded. It means becoming the observer of your reactions, not their prisoner. In this way, daily life becomes your training ground. Every emotion becomes a portal. Every setback becomes a mirror. Let's say your partner forgets something important to you. The habitual response might be to lash out, withdraw, or spiral into old stories of being unworthy or invisible. But the alchemist in you pauses. You take a breath. You feel the tension in your body. You ask not just, why did they forget? But what does this moment reveal about my needs, my fears, my inner dialogue? You do not bypass the pain. You meet it with presence. That is alchemy. This practice begins in the body. The body holds memory more honestly than the mind. That is why somatic practices, like breathwork, movement, and grounding exercises, are not just optional, they are essential. They reconnect you with the parts of yourself that language cannot reach. When anxiety spikes, instead of drowning in thought, you can place your hand on your heart and feel its rhythm. You return home to yourself. Journaling too becomes an act of sacred listening, but not surface-level journaling. Soul alchemists write, not to vent but to excavate. You write to speak to the parts of you that never had a voice. You ask your inner child, what do you need today? You speak to the shadow that you used to fear and say, I see you now. With each word, you integrate. With each page, you become more whole. This is not always glamorous. Often it is quiet, raw, and invisible to others. But it is powerful, because you are no longer reacting from your wounds. You are responding from your awareness. Consider the woman who always feared abandonment. She used to chase love, overgive, and betray her boundaries just to feel safe. But as she practiced daily reflection, she began to notice the pattern. Instead of rushing to fix things, she sat with her fear. She breathed through it. She reminded herself, I am safe in my own presence. Slowly, she stopped chasing. and love began to arrive in a form that didn't require her to disappear. Or the man who was raised in a household where emotions were forbidden. For years he numbed his feelings with busyness and achievement. But every night he began sitting in silence for just 5 minutes. He did not know what he was doing at first, but over time tears came, memories surfaced, and eventually compassion emerged. For himself, for his father, for the lineage of men who never knew how to feel. That 5-minute practice became his altar. His inner landscape transformed, one breath at a time. The world often rewards speed, but the soul requires slowness. And when you choose the slower path of self-inquiry, you become a vessel for something greater than yourself. You no longer live on autopilot. You live on purpose. This is the way of the soul alchemist. You are not here to escape pain, but to turn it into wisdom. You are not here to be perfect, but to be present. Your tools are simple: awareness, breath, ritual, and reflection. But when practiced with sincerity, they create miracles. In the end, you begin to notice a shift. The same old triggers no longer rule you. The same old wounds no longer define you. Life does not get easier, but you become deeper, stronger, softer, more conscious, and perhaps most importantly, more compassionate with yourself, with others, and with the unfolding mystery of it all. Some people heal in silence, others heal in the open, but all healing, no matter how quiet or personal, ripples beyond the self. When you choose to confront your pain instead of project it, when you choose to respond instead of react, when you choose to grow instead of repeat, you become a generational bridge, not just for your bloodline, but for the collective emotional landscape of everyone you touch. It may not seem like much in the moment. You pause instead of yelling. You apologize instead of defending. You take 5 minutes to breathe instead of 5 hours to spiral. These moments may feel small, even invisible, but they are revolutions. You are breaking patterns that have lived in your family, your culture, and your body for decades or even centuries. And you are doing so with nothing but your presence and your willingness to feel what others avoided. Think of the mother who never learned tenderness from her own parents. Her childhood was filled with criticism and cold silence. But she decides to learn. She goes to therapy, she reads, she practices. One day, when her child makes a mistake, instead of shaming them, she kneels down, meets them at eye level, and says, "It's okay to mess up. I'm still here." That moment will echo in her child's memory forever. Not because it was dramatic, but because it interrupted a legacy of pain and introduced the possibility of softness. Or the man who was taught to see vulnerability as weakness. He never cried at funerals. He never said, "I love you," unless it was wrapped in a joke. But something shifts in him. After years of silent suffering, he begins to open, not loudly, not all at once. Maybe he starts by saying, "I'm not okay, but I want to be." Maybe he writes letters to people he never dared to speak truthfully to before. Maybe one day, at his daughter's wedding, he takes the mic, his voice trembling, and tells her how proud he is. That vulnerability becomes the strongest thing he has ever passed down. This is what it means to leave behind a legacy of light, not through perfection, not through control, but through the quiet, consistent choice to let love win over fear, to let awareness lead where habit once ruled, to let tenderness take the place of trauma. Carl Jung believed that the greatest gift we can offer the world is our own transformed self, not because it makes us morally superior, but because it makes us emotionally available. When you heal, you stop needing others to carry the weight of your unspoken stories. You stop unconsciously seeking revenge through relationships, careers, or children. You stop being a mirror of inherited pain and start becoming a mirror of possibility. Your future self, the one who has faced the shadows and held them with compassion, is already whispering to you. That version of you has made peace with the past. They no longer need validation to feel worthy. They no longer abandon themselves to be loved. They walk into rooms without shrinking, speak without performing, love without clinging, and lead without controlling. That self is not far away. They are built moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. So ask yourself this: what would it look like to live today as if your healing matters, not just to you, but to everyone who comes after you? What if your peace became someone else's permission? What if your boundaries taught others how to be brave? What if your authenticity cracked open a space where others could exhale? You are not broken. You are becoming. And what you are becoming is not only for you. It is for the friend who never had the courage to speak, for the child who still wonders if love requires self-sacrifice, for the partner who has only known survival, for the younger version of yourself who thought pain was their permanent address. You are proof that healing is possible, that transformation is not a theory but a lived truth. The past can be composted for something beautiful, so let that be your legacy. Let that be your offering. Let your life say, I did not let my pain define me, I let it refine me, and in doing so, I lit the way for others. Transformation rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with fireworks or sweeping declarations. It shows up quietly, often in the most ordinary of moments. A breath was held a little longer before reacting, a choice to stay instead of running, a whisper in the mind that says, maybe this time I'll do it differently. This is how it begins, not with perfection, but with presence. The path you have walked through this journey is not one of escape, but of return. You have not been asked to forget your past, but to sit beside it, understand it, and see what it has been asking of you all along. Because every wound carries a message. Every scar holds a story, and every story has the potential to become a sacred manuscript of wisdom, if you are willing to read it with new eyes. Carl Jung taught that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That is what you have done here. You have looked at the pieces of your life that once brought you shame or sorrow, and instead of burying them deeper, you let them breathe, you let them speak. And in doing so, you gave yourself permission to become something more whole than you have ever been. You may still have questions. You may still have days where the past echoes louder than the present. That is human. That is healing. But what has changed is your relationship to that echo. It no longer drowns you. It reminds you that you are alive, evolving, and brave enough to feel it all. The alchemical process does not promise a perfect life. What it promises is something better, a meaningful life. One where every tear holds a purpose, every setback holds a lesson, and every chapter builds towards something real. You are not here to perform your worth. You are here to embody it, fully, truthfully, unapologetically. So let this be the beginning of a new kind of authorship, where you no longer write your life from fear or pattern, but from clarity and intention. Where you recognized that your soul was never broken, it was waiting for you to come home. In the comments below, I invite you to share one painful moment that shaped who you are today. Let others witness your gold. Let your story become someone else's mirror. You never know who you might awaken just by telling the truth. This is your next chapter, and you hold the pen. If this message stirred something inside you, don't stop here. The next video will take you deeper into healing, growth, and self-discovery. It might just be the breakthrough your soul has been waiting for. Tap into it now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community committed to truth, transformation, and real inner change. You're not alone on this path. I'll meet you in the following video, where we continue becoming who we were always meant to be.